Ryan Leaf, it's a great honor to be able to feature you in Tuscaloosa. I hope you're doing well, sir.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and we're looking forward to having you back in our town and certainly talking about some things that you're up to and inspiring people with your message. Let's talk about what you're doing these days, because obviously you're traveling to a lot of campuses and a lot of teams and talking about your message. Let's talk about maybe the motivation that you got behind this.
Yeah, so I'm I'm wearing a lot of hats these days. First and foremost, the foundation of where I started at was with Transcend Recovery Community. It's a recovery community that's based here in Los Angeles, where I live, as well as Houston, Texas, and New York, in Manhattan. And they're a sober living environment, and I'm their program ambassador. So I get the opportunity to really have an apparatus at my fingertips to help people who are struggling with mental health and substance abuse issues, similar to what I went through. And more to that, I get to travel around the country, share my story, try to make an impact in communities that are struggling, and speak to football teams on campus as well, to talk to the player, try to help them gain some perspective around the idea that, just because you're a great football player doesn't make you a good person. And if you could build that foundation first, it took me a while to figure that out. I thought I was just really so much more important than everybody else because I played this sport, and it's an institution in our country. And we got to remember that we're just, all flawed human beings, no matter what, trying to be better every single day, whether you're a great football player or, you're a great mortgage broker. It doesn't matter. We're all the same. I also start calling some spring games this spring for the Pac-12 network, and then hopefully doing a bunch of those in the fall as well. But I'm excited to get back to Tuscaloosa. I spent, like I said, a couple days in the fall with the team before the season started. Spent some time with Coach Saban and the coaching staff, and that for me just kind of shows the open-mindedness that Coach Saban has for what he wants to do to try to help his players be better people. And you can really tell that he cares about his players. I think sometimes through the media, it looks like he's always, all business, but he really understands the opportunity that by him being the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, he offers opportunity for these players, not only in the football aspect of things, but educationally and furthering themselves forward.
Ryan, if you could talk to the Ryan Leaf prior to going through some of these valleys, what would you say? Because something tells me there's probably somebody out there in the audience that may be going through or about to go through something that you've went through. What would you tell Ryan Leaf back in the late 90s about to go through some pretty big struggles? What would you tell him?
I'd tell him that, this is going to hurt, but you're going to be okay. I think that's what I would tell myself, because it was important that I go through it. That's kind of a two-edged sword. I could tell myself, how to be different, but then I wouldn't be the person that I am today because of the things I went through. So that's kind of what I would tell myself. I said, hey, this is going to hurt a lot, but you're going to be okay, and you're going to get through it. And I think that's the important thing to say. And when I go into these organizations or into these schools and talk to these teams, I'm not in there telling them what to do. It's been my experience that when you go try to tell people what to do or what not to do, they tend to do the opposite at that age, and there's a lot of entitlement that exists. So I just tend to tell my story, just how it is, the truth, the unvarnished version. And if there's somebody in the room that can relate or reach out and ask for help or know somebody in their family or an acquaintance, that's what it's all about.
Ryan, let me ask you from a support system, and we're going to work our way to football because I want to pick your brain for a lot of different things, but I think your message is very important right now across this society because we are facing a lot of challenges. We do have people that go through a lot of different struggles. Let me ask you about a family member because knowing someone, my father was a severe alcoholic, passed away probably 13, 14 years ago because of alcohol, and I just want to ask you, what would you tell that person that sees that family member going through that? How do you support them? How do you maybe encourage them to continue the fight?
Well, all you can do is show that support. I mean, you can't, no matter how hard you try, you can't want it more than that individual. Otherwise, it's going to destroy you as well. That's why people don't realize how sick the family gets when they have to deal with an addict or an alcoholic. And in my case, my family was right there. They enabled that addict behavior in me until they finally said, we're going to set some healthy boundaries, and we're going to say, it came to a point where I had bonded out of jail, and both my parents, which probably took so much strength, looked me in the eye and asked me to go back. And I can't imagine what kind of strength that took in that moment, because all I know is that my mom wanted to care for her son and make sure he was safe under the roof, but she didn't think I was able to care for myself in any way in a healthy manner. So she knew the safest place for me was back in jail, and she asked me to go. And for whatever reason, I did. I think that was a turning point in my acceptance. But you can do only so much, right? You can support them in any way, shape, or form when it comes to their recovery, but you can no longer enable their addict behavior. And that's difficult sometimes, especially for a parent.
We're talking to Ryan Leaf, former NFL quarterback, certainly a record-setting quarterback when you look back at the Pac-12 and his days at Washington State. We're going to spend some time talking about that. So you're going to be coming to Tuscaloosa, and you're going to be spreading this news of hope and going through, going to be at the Ferguson Center, which is the great hall there inside the Ferguson Center on campus. And it's going to be open. I reached out to the university, and I asked them if I could promote it from not only a student standpoint. We have a lot of students that listen to this program, but also from the community standpoint. It's something that you could walk in, you could come in and hear more of the details. We've got 15 minutes to discuss a lot of different things, but you're going to have over an hour there. April the 23rd, you'll come in and be able to share this message with those individuals. Yeah,
it's just, and this all stemmed from, my meeting with Coach Saban and the team last fall. I mean, he, as you know, when Coach Saban speaks, people listen. And after my visit there, he felt comfortable enough to really refer me in a way to other coaches in the conference as well as the campus in general. And sure enough, I got a call to come speak campus-wide to the University of Alabama. And what an honor, really, to be thought of in that manner and then to be able to do that. And the coolest thing about this is this community that is ever evolving, right? It started small here in Los Angeles, and it's grown. And every place I go to, the community gets bigger and bigger, and I find myself right in the middle of it. And I get to touch so many people. I spoke in Iowa just 2 days ago, and this young lady came up to me afterwards. She waited to the very end for people coming up and asking for some autographs and pictures, and she was just kind of crying and just wanted to hug me and told me how much she appreciated it. I didn't know what exactly she was going through. She didn't really embellish anymore. She just told me thank you and gave me this hug, and it was the sweetest thing. And I could never touch somebody in that way if I hadn't gone through what I did. If I would have been, a successful quarterback and known just for that. I think that it makes me more relatable, and that's why I think when I step on campus on Monday that my story will be relatable. And it's important to know that my story isn't more important than anybody else's. I could probably sit in that audience and have anybody from the audience go up there and talk to me and tell me their story about adversity and life and dealing with it in a positive way, and I would learn something, and it's important to remember.
We're talking to Ryan Leaf, and certainly we want to work our way, but really wanted to highlight that you're going to be here in Tuscaloosa, and for those out there that may have someone that's going through, or maybe you need to learn more about it, I think anybody could probably look into that room, and even if they're not going through some of those valleys, can learn about others and how you can support people that are going through that and maybe just offer a wonderful hope. Let me ask you to go back. When you talk to football players, is there a different message than what you're out talking to the community and to students?
Well, I think it all, the substance abuse is really kind of a small part of the speech. It's about decision-making and choices and human being values, understanding that you have a choice in making decisions, either in a healthy, positive way or in a negative and toxic one. And in a life where control is taken away from you pretty much everywhere, in that moment, you always have control over that. So that's where I kind of go. When dealing with athletes, I tend to, go to that part about just because you're a great athlete doesn't make you a good person part of it, and building that foundation. I start there, and then I talk about decision-making and entitlement, because we get placed on these pedestals. And I can understand that completely at Alabama when you are the predominant number one football team in the country year in, year out. There is a very high pedestal, right? And you are not better or worse than anybody else in your community, though you may get treated like that at some times. It's good to develop empathy by putting yourself in those people's shoes and understanding. And sometimes this gets lost. The fan will place the player on the pedestal, and then the player will see himself there and act accordingly, which can't be the case. Just because you are playing on Saturdays doesn't mean you're entitled to be a jerk or expect special things to happen to you, even though they do from time to time. It's important to take in and keep perspective.
Ryan, let me go to the NFL draft for a couple of minutes. Obviously, when you look back at the success coming out of Washington State, how stressful can the NFL draft process be?
Well, I can only imagine that it's rather stressful. In my case, it wasn't, because I was going to be either the first pick or the second pick behind Peyton Manning. So it really kind of was I don't want to say a cakewalk, but it was just kind of like we knew what was happening. Now it was just a matter of, about where I ended up, whether it was going to be Indianapolis or San Diego. So nowadays, I think it can be rather stressful because there isn't necessarily a definitive answer to who's going to be the first pick, and there's plenty of guys, and we see a huge jump in what happens when the season ends to when the draft happens, the combine, the posturing by the agents, things of that nature. Sometimes these agents are able to sell their client in a way where guys jump way up in the draft, out of nowhere, kind of under the radar, and then boom, they're in front of everybody. So I think it'd be rather stressful. I think if you hire the right guy, the right agent, I think that removes the stress a bit, and you just focus on doing what you do best, and that's playing football, lifting weights, doing the things that made you great and got you to that point. You don't have to deal with the other stuff that's spinning around out there. You actually hire somebody who knows how to do that. And so I think that's probably where the most stressful thing comes in, is actually finding a guy that can do that you trust. And I think the guys have done a pretty good job of that. That's why it was so kind of foreign to me to see that Lamar Jackson didn't do that. And I think, we've seen some complications because of it.
Ron, as you look at this upcoming quarterback class, is there somebody that you like above the other guys that you think can be a franchise-type quarterback in the National Football League?
Well, sometimes being asked these questions as a guy that wasn't successful in the NFL, but was a successful college quarterback, I'm uniquely qualified to kind of talk about it. Not that, it's something that I felt very comfortable with at the start, but I do feel like there is a good crop of quarterbacks. It's hard to say the success rate because of it's a huge part of where you go, what team you end up on. And with Cleveland predominantly picking in the top half of the first round almost annually, it's tough to find that, and you don't know what's going to happen. But in this class, I think the cream of the crop is definitely Josh Rosen. I just think that he is fundamentally and technically the most sound and NFL ready. And also I think he's the most self-aware of any of the quarterbacks out there.
Ryan, do you see college right now preparing quarterbacks for that next step in the transition they'll make at the NFL?
I think so. I think they're much more prepared. I don't think that the fishbowl is as small anymore because of the media scrutiny, the social media, things of that nature. I think they are more adept at talking with the media, dealing with criticism. I think that they understand that everything they do is under a microscope. And before, 20 years ago when I did something on campus, no one knew about it, except maybe on campus if I acted out behaviorally in a poor way, where if something like that happens nowadays, everybody knows about it, and it may be captured in real time, actually. So I think they're much more well prepared. I think the offense is changing a bit. It's becoming more like the college game. Before it was, college offenses and pro offenses were significantly different, and I think there's been an adaptation from the college game to the pro game where we saw that in the Super Bowl, where I think Nick Foles, there was a lot more run-pass options, something similar to what he did when Chip Kelly was there earlier in his career, and he excelled at that and played his best football in more of a collegiate offense. And I think that's a big reason why guys are more prepared and more successful at the quarterback position.
Well, you're talking to Ryan Leaf right now. Find a couple of minutes here with him and visiting with him about some things that he's going to be doing in our community coming up on April the 23rd inside the Ferguson Center. I'd love to get your thoughts from a quarterback perspective. on Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. Certainly, we've got a pretty good, outstanding group of quarterbacks here in Tuscaloosa with both of those individuals.
Yeah, you do. And, I got to spend a little time with Jalen last fall. Knew about Tua, didn't necessarily know what was going to happen. Of course, a lot of us didn't. You had a starting quarterback in the SEC had taken you to 2 national championships, and to have the balls of sorts to simply pull your starter and put in a guy that's never played before to lead you back to win a national championship. I mean, that's a pretty amazing feat. I don't know exactly what's going to happen there. I haven't been following it too closely with the spring practices and everything. Of course, I'm going to discuss it with the staff when I'm down there, hopefully, and see where they're at. But I think Tua, established himself as he can do both, right? He's a much better passer than Jalen. Of course, Jalen a much better physical runner. I don't know if the option has been presented where Jalen lines up in the backfield a little bit while Tua is under center. That may be an option that they're going to take a look at. But I think they're well versed in the quarterback position to go into this next season and be successful.
Ryan, would you let your kids play football? Because right now we've got a lot of people out here talking about they would not. You've been through a lot of different mountaintops as a quarterback. You were an All-American there at Washington State, certainly some valleys as well. What would you tell someone if your son wanted to say, hey, I want to play football? Would you allow him?
Well, I'm going to be in that position. I had a son about 6 months ago, and my wife and I have decided that we're going to talk to him when he's a freshman in high school. He can't wear a helmet until he's a freshman, and then we're going to sit him down and have the conversation about what are the consequences to doing this. Because as much as everybody is talking about the concussion protocol and everything like that, it's not like we were naive in the fact that we didn't know this was a violent game. I knew that I was getting beat around. Now, if the NFL or if people in those positions knew the complete effect of what was going on, that's another question to be had. But if I was given the choice, I'm going to play football. I loved it. It gave me everything I'd ever wanted in this life. So I'm going to educate my child and let him make the decision. It's going to be up to him. And he'll understand the consequences. 15 years from now, I think we're going to have a lot more knowledge and education from the technical aspect of things and the scientific aspect and medical aspect of everything, where that may be obsolete. Football may not be even something that even is organized anymore because of the trauma it's presenting to our other human beings and their brains. And I truly believe that all of us who have played a significant amount of football in our life are going to be living with some form of CTE. I think that the individuals who have taken their own lives develop symptoms instead of getting the help for those symptoms. They chose to not ask for help and ultimately are no longer here. And I think that some of us have found healthy ways to combat that. So I truly do think that, the lot of us who have played significant amounts of football and had significant amounts of head trauma are living with CTE. It can't be diagnosed, of course, until we're no longer here. But I think symptomatically, we can make a pretty good assumption of who's dealing with it and if they're dealing with it in a healthy way.
Hey, Ryan, you're a radio guy, too, so react to this news because it's just now breaking right now in the NCAA. So you're like me. Sometimes you have to react to things. The NCAA Rules Panel just approved fair catches on kickoffs that will result in touchbacks, ball on the 25-yard line. So, in other words, if there is a fair catch and you're at the 15 and you call for a fair catch, it will automatically be pushed to the 25-yard line instead of the 20-yard line. So they're encouraging for kickoffs to do fair catches. It's just now been approved. The NCAA oversight panel has just approved this and will be implemented. Your thoughts?
They're trying to make the game safer. I understand that to protect the player in the game. I'm also, an advocate for it's football. It's a violent sport. The idea that we've had blinders onto that for the last 50, 60 years, is absurd. We know it's a violent sport, and I understand that they're trying to make it safer, but, we're still making a choice to play this game. It's not like we're being forced into it. And there are those who are not going to play. They're going to make the decision not to play because of the consequences that come with it. But I understand why they're doing it. But as a kind of a football originalist, I'm for kickoffs being in play. Big hits by defensive players. I think the targeting rule where you remove the player from the game sometimes is just it just doesn't benefit the outcome of the game, where you could lose a player for not only the rest of the game and possibly the first half of the next game. I don't find that to be helpful in any way. I don't think it's deterring any players from headhunting. I think it's rather allowing something like the missed tackle in the New Orleans Minnesota game to happen, where a sure tackler doesn't make the tackle because he's afraid of getting a penalty, extending the football game, and they're in fact not being fundamentally sound and losing the game in the process.
Ryan Leaf is a program ambassador for Transcend Recovery. He's going to be coming to Tuscaloosa on April the 23rd, and we're looking forward to having him in Tuscaloosa. He's going to be speaking on Monday, April the 23rd. We'll talk more about that closer to time. Might even go back and replay this interview. But Ryan's going to be doing a presentation in the Great Hall of the Ferguson Center on the campus of the University of Alabama. This is not just for students. This is for the community. If you want to go out and listen to Ryan, Ryan's got an amazing story. You can simply go to this interview, YouTube, just do a quick search for Ryan, or you can go to his Twitter account, Ryan D. Leaf. There on the Twitter account, you can watch his video that he's got pinned right there. He does radio on SiriusXM, covers the Pac-12 this morning, NFL, college football analyst on FS1. Hey, Ryan, thanks for not only coming to our community, but your word of encouragement, because it's making an impact, and certainly I appreciate you coming on and visiting and sharing your message here in Tuscaloosa.
Of course, I appreciate you promoting it, and I look forward to spending time with that great community.